Hello everybody, I'm George from Ireland. So here I am showing you Djoser's Pyramid again from this side. I think it's the south side if I've got that right. And there is a door, but I think it's locked and people are seldom allowed in there. There's that wooden barrier to indicate don't go down those steps. Anyway, this is the South Pavilion of the whole complex because there was this Sed Festival and it was annual, wherein the pharaoh would run around the perimeter to signify his suzerainty over the whole of Egypt, because Upper and Lower Egypt were separate kingdoms. Eventually they were united and there was a double crown they wore to indicate that they ruled both. So Lower Egypt being the north, because of course the Nile is going down, flowing to the Mediterranean. Upper Egypt being the south, because it's that bit higher up, because obviously water doesn't flow uphill. Anyway, and so this is part of it. Now, the guys were telling me some of these things have been slightly reconstructed. You can see towards the base of the columns where they seem to filled it in with a bit of cement. And indeed, well, on the pyramid, maybe on the other face of it, you'll see that they seem to have rebuilt it because the stones seem very regular. They're not rough hewn and ill-fitting together. They seem to have some sort of very primitive cement which they're able to do. And Imhotep was obviously a magnificent engineer managing to do it. Anyway, look here, some hieratics. So that was a language used in the hands of the sacerdotal class, because of course very, very few people could read and write. They had no need to. Your main task was producing enough food to eat. And then here's some more of it behind this glass screen. Not that I can read it, but all being recorded and translated. And then nothing up there. And actually, we're not allowed to film the actual pyramid. If you come here, they'll try and shake you down for douceur, saying you can break the rules and do it. And then there are these little recesses, but there's nothing in them. I'm not quite sure what the purpose of them is. And then look up here. You really want to stay on the right side of the law in this country, and I always have. Anyway, so this is this courtyard, and this bit here is looking rather like, to me, that they've reconstructed it, because if they don't do that kind of thing, the whole thing can collapse. The question arises, how much should they rebuild it? Or does that just make it fake? Like this little wall here must have been rebuilt, because the Great Pyramid at Giza had casing stone, white casing stone, for many, many centuries, most of which has gone by 1646. Should they rebuild that to show what it was really like, gleaming, visible from perhaps 100 miles away? Because you can very easily see it from 20 miles away. Obviously, depending on the direction, it's not too hazy because there's this smog over Cairo a lot of the time. And just a minute ago, perhaps you couldn't hear it with the naked ear, I heard the azan, the prayer call, re-echoing up from the Nile Valley, which is that away. So there's a new conception of the divine in Egypt these days. They're Muslims, Sunnis, almost without exceptions. I mean, the Shia are somewhat frowned upon. There are very, very few Ahmadis. Being an atheist or an agnostic is considered totally unacceptable. So you mustn't defend the majority faith here. That is a crime, or indeed any Abrahamic religion. I don't think that's too stringently enforced against those who insult the minority religions. Anyway, so when you come here, do expect people to shake you down, to ask you for tips all the time. That's part of the course in this part of the world. And bear in mind, 35 Egyptian pounds, that's the average daily wage, okay, a bit higher in Cairo. So people will follow you, offer to help you. You can't really tell who's working here or not, because some of the people working in the Department of Antiquities don't wear a uniform, but ask for a badge. Don't take their word for it. They might not. So some people pass themselves off as a guide, not really knowledgeable about Egyptology at all, and often you haven't asked for their help, and they'll be genuinely helpful and create a sense of indebtedness in you. And the police officer following us, well, he's been a little bit helpful to me, and obviously he's wanting something at the end. So I'm a little bit hacked off with him, but I might give him a tenner just to shut him up. Don't want any trouble with the law. And look at this bit in here, I'm not quite sure what I'm looking at. So, anyway, extraordinary. What a complex. And there are more little tombs just beyond the perimeter fence. So the fence wouldn't be terribly difficult to climb, but I wouldn't recommend it. You don't want to pull a fast one and climb in here. There's no snacks or drinks to be had once you get in. And there are people trying to flog you various bits of memorabilia, souvenirs. No, thank you. So it's not that bad. They're not too persistent. Like, as I remember someone in Tangier, a guide said to me, it was quite persuasively, that one mosquito is better than 20 mosquitoes. and look over here, and the camel just beyond the fence. So you can hire the ship of the desert. Apparently in ancient Egypt they didn't have camels. They only came from Saudi Arabia much later. So they couldn't cross the desert so easily. There was Siwa, which is one of the desert oases they used to somehow get to. Well, load up loads of water on your horse and go. Because I'm not sure when they got the wheel. Certainly when they built the Great Pyramid about 2600 BC, they didn't have the wheel. And likewise, what they hear is much older than the Great Pyramid. Having to put a piece of stone on sleds and drag it across the sand. Obviously want to find hard sand as possible, not to sink into the sand. But apparently people volunteered for that. This is conjecture somewhat, and would have been quite handsomely remunerated. Okay, so meat to build up their muscles, to give them energy and so on. But you think, weren't people dispensable? Maybe they weren't that dispensable. Population was much, much lower. Life expectancy was much, much lower, perhaps about 30. So you couldn't afford to be working people to death. They were not that easy to replace. So it's perhaps not the case you could dispose of them. I mean, certainly the skilled craftsmen, maybe some of the labourers were quite easily replaced. Obviously they certainly had servitude at the time. So they're obviously worshipping Ra, because there's a back formation, because that's so little scientific knowledge. They had to invent explanations to explicate natural phenomena. You know, like the ancient Greeks, why we have what's the other one? This guy is just not going away. Trying to sell me this stuff. No man, I don't want you in my video, thank you. Trying to sell me souvenirs. And the Greeks thought it was Aesculapius, the god of medicine, was one of the ones worshipped here. And in one of the ancient Greek epics, they had the Olympian pantheon fleeing to Egypt, and that's to say, well, that's how the Egyptians have notions of our gods, which is a little bit different because of their visit to Egypt. So there's an explanation for everything, and they had gods and goddesses, you know, heads of crocodiles and all sorts of animals. Ra, the sun god, and there's one epic about someone's body being chopped up, scattered all over Egypt, but then being able to put it all together again and come back. So there was a sort of a dualism. They had some concept of hell, of being rewarded, some sort of a notion of Elysium. So they really were far ahead in science, technology, medicine, and things like that. The most civilized country in the world for a very long time. Perhaps only Babylonia, that's now Iraq, was a little bit ahead of them. And they got little pyramids there as well, but they're much later than these ones. You think of all what could have been done in terms of farming, flood defences, housing, anything actually constructed for people. And it's staggering how people will always sacralize and celebrate inequality, how humanity tends towards that, towards adulating the mighty, the wealthy. And look at this pedestal with just the feet. I mean, presumably it wasn't always there. Where's the rest of the statue? I was going to say, well, I can't show you. Around the corner there's some holes. There's some holes in the wall, and there was a likeness of Jossa there, and he was looking out the holes in the wall, so you could see the Sed ceremony, as in running around. Was it this courtyard or the whole thing? I don't quite get it. And therefore he could still be gazing out on his realm and conferring legitimacy on his heirs and successors. Okay, my goodness, I don't know what this courtyard is about. There's just so much to take in. I couldn't remember it all from my reading earlier. So yeah, that's enough from me. Bye bye.